Greetings and welcome to the Pure Report. I'm your host, Rob Ludeman. It is time to bring the orange and look at this, everybody. I got Andrew, I got JD, the Unplugged crew.
You've got a sign. There's the sign.
There's the Pure Report sign, and we are in the new studio. We actually made it.
I feel like we're grown up now.
We are grown up. We're absolutely grown up. It's great to have both of you here. For those just catching us the first time, Andrew Miller, JD Wallace. We've been doing the audio podcast for a while, the Unplugged segment.
3 years.
3 years of the Unplugged, coming up on right around 7 years of the Pure Report podcast. And my dream was always to get into video, and we are finally here. How's it feel?
Literally
Andrew?
a dream come true.
It was a dream come true. Andrew?
We thought about getting all dressed up and wearing sport coats and everything. We're like, let's just be who we are.
Yeah, they're over in the corner of the room somewhere. JD, great to be here.
Great to be here. You know, had a great flight down last night, and as always, such a privilege to see everyone here at headquarters, and especially you and my friends on the marketing team over here. It's a lot of fun to be here.
We are ready to go. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us with this first episode. This is the premiere of the Pure Report on video. Super, super exciting. And we're going to revert back, right? Just to set a level set for everybody here. What we did in Unplugged, whether you caught it or not, is we spent 3 years going through what we call the 15 architectural decisions around Pure Storage.
One at a time.
And we did them one at a time. And we did them in a 50-minute per episode format with other segments included, which made it really difficult if you wanted to go learn those things. So we thought, what a great idea with this format, with video, to really hone in and just deliver those to you, take advantage of the new studio, and give you the foundational areas. And we're going to break them up in chunks for you, right? So we'll have 4 or 5 different videos that we're going to do around this, and hopefully things that you can call back on as a viewer, as a listener, and to share with friends, share with colleagues, as we always do here. Are we ready to go, gentlemen?
I'm ready to go.
This has been a long time coming. I've had multiple partners, SEs, customers say like, hey, I actually want to go through all the decisions. I'm like, there's 15 podcast episodes, and here's all the time marks, and that feels like a lot of work. So
it occurred to me recently, JD, with something that you did with the new community platform that we have. You went and wrote a blog, and you listed all 15 of them hyperlinked, and that is great. But that's 15 to 16 hours of content somebody's got to
15 hours to kill this weekend. You should go check that out.
That's right. Or watch our videos here over a course of a few hours. Yeah. So I am super excited to get in. Andrew, give everybody a backdrop just on the 15 architectural decisions in general. What is it? Why?
Yeah. So this actually goes back to, there's a piece where it says they go back to 2009 and the origin of Pure. And there was actually a session, JD, and you've actually watched some of the original videos of Kaz and some of the original folks, Alex McMullen, Chad Kenny, Michael Cornwell, actually going through and talking to SEs about some of the decisions, the principles behind Pure, that actually, if you came from a historical storage background or somewhere else, they actually took you a little bit unawares. You were like, this isn't what I'm used to. And so the origin of this actually was, frankly, an internal session helping SEs understand the decisions that we made and why, so they could really at that time almost evangelize them to their customers, that there was really solid technical underpinning. I think you were actually rewatching some of those to prepare for this, JD.
I was, and what really struck me is I'm trying to put myself back in that mindset. This was early in my career,
right?
And I had the opportunity to work with a few of these startups, and we'll pour one out for a few. Many of them don't exist anymore.
It was a dogfight at the time. There were so many flash startups. It was crazy.
It was, and I think the thing that really resonates with me is that we were doing a lot of things. That's what we're talking about here, fundamentally different. And different is scary. And so when we go talk about something different, customers, partners, we're like, hey, you're doing it different, so it's wrong. And this session was really about peeling back the layers of the onion and saying, no, there's actually a really deliberate reason why we made these decisions. And if we arm you with that information, you're going to be better prepared to tell that story. And at the end of the day, we're all storytellers. That's what this is all about.
Right. Well, and what's interesting for me is that we're still talking about this, right? You just go back 15, 2000. Like, these are things that have not changed for us. We have evolved. We've grown, right? There are areas that we will hit on where we've continued to stay with the trend, with the industry, with the technology, and made it better. But we're still talking about these because they're still so fundamentally important to what we do.
These are, I sometimes call them technology gifts that keep on giving, because we're going to go through the same principles and different applications over time. It's how when I joined 6 years ago or so, I actually had someone point me and say, hey, you should learn these. And I was like, these are kind of old. I was like, no, they're super relevant. Trust me. And I was like, Cool. I'm glad I did.
We are still making decisions today based on these fundamental principles.
And the decisions made around these fundamental principles guide what we actually are capable of doing, right? And not breaking things. So let us go ahead and dive in. We're going to tackle two on this episode together. We're going to do simplicity. We're going to do scale. Those two seem to fit really well together as the foundational ones to hit on as we go through. We're going to hit on what the technology or the concept is. We're going to hit on comparisons to the industry. Well, how have other entities tried to do this, or what is the comparison there? And we won't be too explicit, but you might know who we're talking about.
Try to make it real. Be helpful.
We'll try to make it real and helpful and honest. And then if you are a user or a customer or you're a prospect or you're just checking out Pure, why should you care? What does it help you do?
And one thing I love about this is for anyone who's looked at Start With Why,
right.
We actually talked about this. The customer value, what matters to you, that is actually the why. It's at the end, but we figured, well, we actually need to talk about what it is. Otherwise, it won't make sense. So we'll have the why in there, but we actually intentionally kind of inverted it.
Yeah, we did. We twisted it around. Okay, let's dive in. Simplicity. And actually, there were times when I had Kaz on the podcast once. And I did in and I started asking him about simple. And he went, Rob, people talk about it as simplicity. It's really intuitive. And so I want to make sure we bring that out as well. But simplicity as a concept, one that we hear most frequently about what we offer a customer in their experience. Simplicity, Andrew.
So this is a little bit of, if we go back in the time machine somewhat, and embracing first the kind of what it is, what simplicity means. So you could actually take a very negative perspective, whereas all the things you don't have to do anymore, all the no's, if you will, that there is, and there's actually some things that talks about like historically, no tiering or tuning, no RAID configuration, no caching, no hotspots, no rebalancing, no alignment. That all sounds actually very negative, unless you realize I had to spend all my day doing all that stuff and thinking about it. And that was actually me back on some historical platforms. It was actually kind of fun because I was learning a lot, but that took up a lot of time.
Time you weren't spending company problems.
Yeah.
So there's also the aspect where that's interesting is that when we play this out, and we're going to get into this more, but if you start with, I want to make everything simpler on the outside, how do you make it simpler on the outside for me, for you, for customers? You actually do that by making it a lot more complex on the inside. So you actually sometimes have there's this irony, and you have people that are very deep in storage and technology at Pure, and they believe in the simplicity of the product, and they know what you have to engineer on the inside. And that's why we don't just stop at decision number one to actually get that simplicity. We have to do all this stuff on the inside. The one analogy I often think of, a lot of folks know, is the thermostat that I grew up with was a lot simpler on the inside, even though it was more complex. There's a little slider. If you have a Nest thermostat or Insert Smart thermostat, whichever you prefer, it's a little more complex on the inside.
On the inside, yeah.
More intuitive on the outside.
I think of a couple stories there. I don't know, but so that's the core of, I think, what it is. And this started from the standpoint of being self-configuring, self-healing, self-adapting. So a lot of things you don't have to do, and then being more intelligent, hopefully, about the things that you do.
I think it's also an adjustment period for some users, though, to have gotten, if we go back 10 or 15 years to the first release of the products, right, there are tasks that storage admins had to do just because that's the way the products they were fundamentally used to using were designed to do. And it made me chuckle. Recently, there was a post on the Pure Reddit board where a user was complaining that they did not have access to get into log information. Why can't I go access logs so I can dig in and sift through the data and see what's going on? And the really quick response from another user, not even from a Puritan, was, why would you want that? It's taken care of for you in the array.
Maybe a little bit of, so I'm actually thinking about a little bit about comparative here, and this is now kind of the industry. I don't know if you want to go there a little more, JD, as far as kind of what we were seeing at the industry at the time, because you were a storage admin.
You were part of all that.
I was very much a back office IT guy managing storage when this was all very popular. And I think you really talked about it. I think one of my early jobs with a storage product in those days, I had to go for training for 2 weeks. 2 weeks worth of training.
What were you trained on? Just using it?
All of the things that we talk about,
all the day-to-day stuff,
the
how to create
things.
RAID groups, how to partition storage, how to manage, appropriately shutting the array down, how to tune performance, how to do all of the little minutia that you had to do to make
capacity
this
planning.
all of that.
All of it.
Right. And this is where we look to the future a little bit. I think, we've progressed enough that in the industry, we don't think about a lot of these things from the specific data product perspective anymore. But this concept still applies to how we approach business, right? We think cloud, when you go to a public hyperscaler and you go provision storage, you don't have to think about those things either.
No.
But we were a little bit ahead of our time, so to speak, in kind of evolving that mode of thinking. And now we can take that same fundamental principle and apply it to everything else that we're doing.
Yeah.
So this is to your point. I mean, I had certifications on multiple different storage arrays and platforms, both as a partner and as a customer, because you needed to learn all this stuff. It was actually kind of fun to learn it. But what you didn't realize, and this has now been even, I think, personal evolution for both of us, is that if you aren't doing things that are linked to what the business cares about, ultimately your job could be a little more at risk than you might like or you might think, kind of thing. And when you're up, like maybe out of college, I'm a junior admin. It's like I don't have any sense of that. I'm just doing all the stuff that I'm given to do. So there's this piece there, and I'm going to blur a little bit over into customer value, if that's all right, Rob. We had our structure, and we'll try and follow it.
D on that one too. I might bookend it for you.
So we think about eliminating operational inefficiencies. We think about even removing, how do you reduce the chance that you're going to make an error? You take certain workflows out entirely, the things that you don't have to do at all, you can't get wrong. You can't actually mess up as a human, because we're all humans kind of thing. But then if I flip it around from a customer value standpoint, there's the Ander of 20 years ago. But there's also, if you're a CIO out there and you're saying, like, how many people do I need to run these systems?
The admin ratios, right?
We have a great stat out there of a customer who's half on Pure and half on other stores. They're a very large global bank. They have a dual vendor strategy. Okay, I get that. We're not here to argue about that right now, at least.
Yeah.
It requires roughly 8 to 10 times the number of people to administer their non-Pure fleet as their Pure fleet kind of thing. So it's dramatic, even from how many people do I need to have running this. And in that case, this is now not the, hey, we let go of people, but usually there's more work to do than the IT teams can do. And if you have capable people, they can focus on automation or scripting or stuff that links more into the business than keeping the lights on.
Well, and that's the part I was going to bookend too, because some of the most interesting conversations over my 7 years here plus have been with individuals that we got somewhat intimate with after they started using Pure, and their careers took different trajectories.
Pure.
The storage admin who was only doing storage went and learned to be a DBA, and more recently people that are working in containers and going and becoming cloud architects, right? And so there is this notion that the simplicity does not eliminate jobs, does not eliminate functionality. It allows you to go learn other things and advance your career. And that's a part that I love. Those are always powerful conversations when we hear from our customers and users around those.
Absolutely.
There was even, this goes back, and we may have, you can find this if you Google on it, but originally the idea was the Pure manual was a tent card.
Right.
It was a business card, and then it was a tent card. I'm not going to say, we don't have great documentation teams that do longer things, but the core piece of setting the array up and getting it up and going, you could actually have on a business card or like a two-sided tent card that's the size of a business card kind of thing.
Well, legendarily, Kaz had his 5-year-old do the install to ensure that it was simple and easy enough to read for anyone. We good? Anything else we need to tie into that one, JD?
Just from kind of a history perspective, for those folks who have been with Pure for a long time, we have the concept of busy meter, right? And I love how that really came out of this core principle of simplicity, where we didn't know any better in the early days. So said, well, I need to see CPU utilization. I need to see memory utilization in the array. Why?
Yeah.
Those values don't mean anything to you. And so where we eventually got to was, let's take and synthesize those different parameters into a single parameter that does have value and meaning, which is, how busy is your system?
Yeah.
Right?
Across all the different subsystems.
Everything.
And there's a bunch of them.
Right.
So
yeah. It's a good end. Okay. Simplicity. We did that one. Let's hit the number 2 for this episode. Scale, a little bit of a loaded term. I think you can look at scale and go in a number of different directions. So when the initial principles were defined, what was it about scale? Was it capacity? Was it growing as data grows? Or was it something else, or kind of a combination all above?
I have a little bit of a more historic view on this one, because
Let's start there.
I like the history
Again,
part.
I think this is fun to kind of put ourselves back in 2009-ish
Okay.
and think about what the industry was doing. Think about all these startups that were trying to rethink storage. And a lot of them were, okay, well, let's cluster together multiple discrete systems so that I can get a level of performance and maybe reliability. And so we're looking at all of these products where I just piece together nodes. And, as a startup, Pure looked at a similar kind of architectures. And the very first flash array absolutely might have looked like that in a slightly different world. But we start to think about, how do we go and actually bring a product to market as a startup? When you look at a multi-node scale-out cluster, you start to see cost. All of those nodes have cost. And then you start to see second and third order costs. Well, okay, what are the costs of all the cabling that I've got to plug in to make all those things work? And not just the raw cost of the cabling, but the increase to complexity in terms of what that means for
people
reliability.
costs, time costs, yeah.
I think,
I'm going to trust a startup for that.
Well, and let's say if I've got 10 cables for a system, and I'm just making this up, and then another system, a scale-out system with all these nodes that has 100, I have 10 times more cable failures that I'm going to have now. Yeah. And so looking at the different possible architectures of storage and kind of iterating through, hey, actually with the increases in performance I'm getting through Moore's Law and the CPUs I'm putting in here, and the increases in efficiency that we were getting, and some things we'll talk to later about how we actually manage storage, we came to the realization that in a scale-up architecture, we could get all the performance we needed, we could get all the reliability we needed, and we could do it in a package that was more cost-efficient and more reliable for the customer. Now, look to the future. We have FlashBlade now. We've built scale-out products. There's certainly applications that can benefit from those kind of architectures. But if we think back to the genesis of Pure, it was, how do we go build something that's going to meet all of the customer's design parameters and do it in a really efficient way?
And do it without diminishing returns, right? That was what came to my mind as you started describing the nodes scaling up. And there is a parallel to other types of IT architectures, right? You look at node scaling in servers, for example, things like that, right? It's a good solution, but when you start scaling up, it gets complex and it gets costly. Same thing. And so the ability to scale within the system, and we'll talk about a lot more of those things in future episodes of this, but that's where it gets solved. Andrew?
If you think about scale out versus scale up, because that's what, and actually the title here is most efficient architecture at scale. Maybe that's all with all capital letters on it, kind of thing. So we're scaling up versus out. So there's even the piece sometimes where you think about, scale out. If we go back as well, embracing the history, there was a sense that scale out storage was going to rule the day, and that you had to have more engines or directors or nodes, et cetera. And Pure was actually being a little bit counter-cultural of what people expected at the time in some ways, saying like, no, this is actually a better approach to do scale up. Moore's Law is going to be a major factor. We can ride it. So there was a little bit of almost contrarianism here. And there was also, now going back to the history, the very first flash array that shipped was a single controller, because it was actually built, well, one, what can get out the door quickly, okay? And also, if you're a startup, you focus on use cases that are really good. VDI was really good for that. So there was you had cases where you actually didn't need the resiliency of a dual controller architecture. So that actually made sense. It was a viable first product while you're figuring other things out. And then as you look at hey, do we need to build on that complexity, or can we run faster to customer needs? And we could actually do it that way. Now, like you mentioned, JD, and even some of the videos we've watched, there was this thing of hey, maybe there was dreams maybe of doing scale out at the very beginning. But it was let's actually respond to what the market needs and what customers need and what someone would trust a startup for.
Right.
And then you follow that path and you end up with some really interesting, logical places. Kind of thing.
And we're still here because we did follow that path. We solved it. I love that you mentioned VDI. Certainly as virtualization evolved in VMware, and then you get into block database type of functionality, we provided the scale at a higher cost at the time, but for some of those mission critical things, or where in VDI it was less mission critical, we were still solving the
small enough building blocks, blast radiuses,
reasonable building blocks to meet that. But kind of everything at that time was VDI, right? There wasn't all this distributed stuff, so it was super important.
Now, you may be thinking, if you're listening to this, you're you're painting yourselves into a corner here. Just you wait and come back for the next video where we'll talk about decision number 5 about statelessness. And if folks, you've been familiar with some of the drawbacks of scale up, which is how do you modernize in place over time? Well, that was actually probably the capstone decision. I was thinking about this earlier when we just kept going, Rob. It was the capstone decision we're going to hit on is evergreen, which is non-disruptive everything. But we're going to walk through how we accomplish that, because you could already be thinking like, ooh, I had scale-up architectures that didn't work out in the past. Yeah, there are some drawbacks, but they're ones that we very intentionally take on in the next video. Is that enough of a teaser? Is it too much? I don't know.
That's okay. We're going to be teasing a lot of things.
Yeah, they're all related.
Watch these episodically, right? They'll go through. They'll be so interested. They'll hit the entire slate all in time. What else do we need to hit on most efficient architecture at scale? Anything else? We kind of touched on the how does it compare aspects and a little bit of the history.
I might end on a little bit of a mic drop. I mean,
please.
Thinking back to some of those early competitors, we could have gone that route. We could have said me too, and we didn't. And I'm thinking back, a lot of those companies not in business anymore.
Not here anymore, or they've been absorbed.
So, the market picks the winners, and I'm very, very proud that the decisions that we chose led us to where we are today, 15 years later.
It's a good mic drop. And you didn't break our new fancy mics, so that's a good thing.
Can I do a 1.5 drop?
Do it.
That scale-up architecture has taken us all the way to FlashArray XL, which is in the terabytes, petabytes. This has gotten really big. So this was a decision that you may have said before, the only way you can hit certain sizes and limits and blast radiuses or failure domains, whatever positive or negative way you want to say that, you can never get there with scale-up. Scale-up, you have to do scale-out. No, you can actually take a really well-designed scale-up architecture really far. And then, of course, we also said we're going to do scale-out too with FlashBlade. Yeah. But that's the story for another day.
And then take it full circle. We did all that with the simplicity that we already covered earlier in this segment. Which is super cool.
I feel like that's a wrap.
Okay, that is a good wrap. Well, thank you, gentlemen. Really exciting to hit this first one. And coming up next, we're going to go into a couple aspects. We're going to hit episode 2 and do Flash and do data reduction. So please tune into that one. If you're still watching here, we hope that you still are. And if you are listening on the audio version of this, thank you for listening. So great to have you both in studio here. And if you are listening or watching, please share it out. As we always say on our audio episodes, share it out, tell a friend, tell a colleague, and we will keep the great content coming for you. And with that, let's go ahead and wrap. And I'm going to do the same wrap for Pure Storage, Andrew Miller, and JD Wallace. This is Rob Ludeman saying, don't look back. Something might be gaining on you.